Alright, so let's see if we can give you some pointers and advice on creating maybe mist over water and to get the most out of this particular composition. It's a great setup and you've got something that I think you can really work with. Same thing for this next one. Any advice I give you, you can definitely apply it to this particular composition. And also, I really like this one. I like the saturation of the colors and how you've got a good dark background with a light focal point on your main area. And you maybe want to take this figure and blend it in with, I would say this one would work best if you want to blend the two photographs together. So let's jump into Photoshop. I'm going to drag the first Creek picture into Photoshop and just give you an idea to get the most out of colors. Here's a quick little tip that I like to do. If you go to your Layers palette and make a copy of the background layer, you can do this by dragging the layer down to the new layer icon. So it's got a copy of it on top of it. And we're going to change the layer's blending mode from normal to overlay. Doing that automatically, and I'll go back and forth, you can see it's taking the lightest lights and the darkest darks and it's really just making both of those pop out. So here's before and here it is after. So now you've got a really good contrast between the river bed that's in the middle of it, the background, and the foreground. If you want to take it a step further, with the background copy layer selected, go to Image and Adjustments, and let's bump up the vibrance and also the saturation of it. So I'm going to bring this up, vibrance, and let's go all the way up to 100%, and maybe the saturation up a good bit. If you go too much, it's going to start to look like Candyland. You don't want that. So I'm bringing my saturation up maybe 20–30% right there. So automatically I've got a composition that looks really, really lush, really, really full of color. And this will especially make it a lot easier for you to blend the foreground and the background with the other photograph that's such full of color. Next thing that you wanted to do was, how can we get it to look like natural looking mist rising up out of the area? To do this, I'm going to make a totally new layer. So I'm going to go to Layers, New Layer, it's a blank layer. Let's go over to our toolbox. I'm going to grab the paint bucket. If you don't see it, it's hiding under the gradient tool. And I'm going to choose just a black foreground color. So with that selected, I'm going to fill in layer 1 solid black. And this is where we're going to paint in our smoky area, the mist for it. Next thing, I'm going to change my foreground color to white. Grab your paintbrush tool, then go up to the paintbrush options and choose a brush that's a pretty good size. That's about 100 megapixels or 100 pixels. Yeah, that's not big enough. In my case, about 300 pixels will work out. We also want the hardness to be down to 0. We want a very, very soft edge brush. Next, since we're going to be building up clouds, drop your opacity down to about 10 to 20%. I'm going to keep it on 20 for now. And what we want to do is we want to paint in the entire area. Let's actually drop the opacity down a little bit more. Let's make it 10%. The way clouds work are, we'll take just over and over again, you're going to build up one area on top of the other. Ooh, let's drop the opacity down maybe even to 5%. And now, yeah, 5% gives us really good. We're going to focus in maybe on one area, keeping another area a little less focused. And this doesn't have to look perfect. The best thing about clouds are you can make a mistake and they still look good. So I'm just going to build up certain areas really quickly and leaving other areas to be pushed back. Smoke and clouds also, they have a shadow. So if you need to add some shadows, grab your burn tool, which looks like this. Make sure it's set to highlights. Drop your exposure down to about 20%. And then you can burn in some other shadows maybe on the bottom edge. I'm going to bring my exposure or change my range to the midtones. There we go. Now it's starting to look a little bit more like a cloud type area. Pretty good. If you want to take it an extra step further, choose your Smudge Tool. The Smudge Tool will allow you to push things around. I'm going to make it a pretty good size brush. Yeah. Set your strength to about 40–30%. And then you can kind of push around different areas. The downside to the smudge tool is sometimes it takes a long time for things to work around. But if you work on it, you can kind of see that I can make smudgy areas go a little bit quicker. And I'm kind of bringing out that particular area. Another tool, if you wanted to play around with it, is the mixer brush tool. This is a new one that I don't have a lot of exposure to, but with this one you can kind of push in areas and it blends and mixes stuff. And you can just push it back and forth and mix them around. And it gives you a little bit better idea of the smoke. Okay, close enough. So with this one selected, let's go back over to our layers. We need to get rid of the black area and just keep the white area. Someone change my layer mode to screen. Watch what will happen. Bingo. Gets rid of all the black, and now what I'm left with is a white area. You can see I can move it around. I could even scale this. With my move tool selected, I've got show transform controls, and so I can see my bounding box. This will allow you to change the size of it, and you can place it down there. Now it looks like there's mist really rising up off the water and interacting with the landscape, not just having to dodge it out, but it's actually working really well. With this one, you could even make copies of layer 1 and place it maybe some on the foreground, resize it, and you just got a whole plethora of smoke that's just rising off of the water. Whoop, clicking too much. So now, got that working pretty good. So that looks pretty good. If you ever needed to, if you think it's maybe too much smoke that's going on there, select the layer. You can also drop the opacity for that particular layer, and that'll knock it back just a little bit so you can see more of your background, make it look a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to drop the opacity for a couple of those. Already looking pretty good. So here it is without it, here it is with it, rising up, looking a little more natural. Let's see if we can add in the other person into your layer and work with it. So I'm going to grab her a photograph, drag it into Photoshop. Always remember to drag not straight into the picture, but down to the icon so it'll open up in its own window. Now we're going to drag her into this photograph. Let's see, it would be much easier if I can see her feet. Since you can't see her feet, it's going to be a little bit difficult blending her image into this image just anywhere. One thing I do like about it is you have this branch going out in front of you, giving it a really good foreground. So actually I want to keep this branch, and I'm going to rescale this. Let's see. Make her a little bit bigger, place this down at the bottom. I can drop the opacity of this layer to kind of see what's behind it and where she's being placed. So yeah, she'll be kind of right there. Maybe I'll make her a little bit bigger, take up a little bit more room. Adding her to this composition is great because now you're adding a central focus to your entire composition. No longer are you just looking at a river, you don't know what you're looking at, but you actually have a character that you're going to look at. And that's going to make your composition a lot better. Let's bring the opacity back up. And what I need to do is I need to knock out the background that's around her, but still keep the foreground and the ground that she's standing on. To do this, I always recommend working in a layer mask. Turn on a layer mask, got layer 2, click on the little circle at the very bottom, and that's going to create an extra icon in layer 2. Within this icon, and make sure you have it selected, you can paint black and white and it will mask out the area. This is what I mean. Grab my regular brush tool, just a regular brush, not the mixer brush, and we're going to work in black and white colors. Anything that's painted black is going to erase away. Anything that's painted white is going to bring it back. So watch this. I'll zoom over here and start painting. Oh, by the way, I need to adjust my opacity. Let's bring that back up to 100%. Now when I start painting, it looks like I'm erasing away the pixels, but actually I'm not. I'm masking over the area. And it has one distinct advantage to doing that. Let's say I accidentally erase away too much. I've erased away her. Well, all I've got to do is swap out and start painting with white. Maybe make my brush a little bit smaller, and I can bring her image back. And so this is a great way to work from one image to another. By the way, if you hit the X key, you can toggle back and forth. So I know I'm painting in black now. I can get rid of her outline. Around her image, make it a little bigger. Softer edge brush. And I'm purposefully going way too much over that, because I can hit the X key again, start painting in white, and bring her back. And this is something that it's going to just take a lot of practice doing. There's no quick, easy fix, especially when you're trying to merge two people together, two layers, and making it look very consistent. I do recommend zooming in so you can at least see what you're working on. So for her image, paint it back, and then we'll paint back in that particular area. Down. I'll zoom back out. Oh, losing the focus here. Another way, I'm going to drop my opacity down just a little bit. This way it'll make it, there we go, blend a lot better. So now this is blending in. Swap back to white and bring it back up for this way. Alright, that's looking pretty good. So I've put her into this particular composition. I can always continue playing around with it. Another thing you can do, since she is in front of everything, I'm going to bring her layer in between some of these smoke layers, and this will add the smoke texture in front of her and kind of make it blend, look a little more natural. Maybe, a little bit. The last thing I would do, since her colors are so much different than the other colors, we need to adjust the levels until the brightness of her matches the brightness of her surroundings. This is what I mean. I'm going to choose her layer, in this case it's layer 2. Then we're going to go to Image, Adjustments, and choose your levels. From here, drag your sliders, usually the white slider inward. That's going to make her much lighter. And until, notice I'm looking at her shirt and it's starting to kind of blow out a little bit, so I'm going to bring it back a bit. Maybe grab the gray slider and move it. There we go. Now her midtones are starting to really line up, and you can see the foreground is blending very well with the background. And this is something just to play around with. There's no easy way of saying what you could do. And we'll say OK. So, in other words, to blend her in, use a layer mask, and then you can take out the area and bring it back. You've added some extra mist to the background. The last thing I would do is have some sort of one unifying color placed over the entire thing. Right now you've got a lot of greens and a lot of browns. If you place one unifying color over it, it'll make the composition really pop and be a lot more cohesive. Here's how you can do it. Here's the easy way of doing it. I'm going to choose the very top layer, layer 1, copy. Then go over and find your adjustments layer. These are little kind of adjustments that you can add to your entire composition. Our case, we want to choose the photo filter. With photo filter selected, it's going to add this color on top of your entire composition. You can see it's in its own layer. And by adjusting the density, in our case we're adding a little bit of orange to everything that's on there. So if I turned it off, here it is without the orange, here it is with the orange. Doesn't look like a lot, but having that just that little bit really does add a lot of punch to your overall composition. If you wanted, let's see what it looks like with maybe a deep blue. So deep blue adds that nice cool shade to it. Since it's in the morning, maybe kind of an upbeat type thing, you would want to stay away from the blues. See what a deep red looks like. Ooh, deep red may be too much for it. We'll knock that back some. I like the orange. Let's do a warming filter. Make the area a little bit warmer. Much, much better. So now here it is without the warming filter. Here it is with the warming filter. Your mist that you have on there has that a yellow tinge to it. Everything has that orange warm glow, which makes your composition a lot more unified. If you want to take it a further step, here's kind of a trendy thing that a lot of people do. I'm going to add one more new layer. I'm going to change this layer mode to, let's try overlay. We're going to add just a swatch of color to the right or left hand side, and this is going to make it look like if you've ever seen an old photograph that maybe had some light leaking inside of it, and so it kind of has this color that's off, usually on the edges of it. Here's how to do that. Go back over to your tools, choose the gradient tool. Up in your options, make sure you have the second one selected. This is going to be the foreground to transparent. So whatever foreground color you have selected, in our case, I'm going to go over to our swatches. I'm going to choose maybe, let's try this blue, since everything is orange, the opposite of it is blue. I'm going to make an orange gradient from the top left-hand corner moving downward to the bottom right-hand corner. Just click and drag. Automatically, that's adding a little bit more of a color overlay. It's really making those greens pop out. You can try this with other ones. I'll undo that one. Let's see what an orange overlay would allow you to do. So there you go, giving a much more orange type feel to it. You can even play around with the blending modes. Instead of overlay, soft light will give you some different options. Vivid light, maybe give you a little bit something different. Screen will definitely do something different. I'll delete that one out. Let's see, try that with, let's go back to our blue and change it back to hard light. Ooh, too much. Try again. There we go. That blue overlay. Fantastic. Now it's like she's looking up to something. Some light is coming up from that particular side. My eye is being drawn in from the top right, moving down towards her, and then back around through this branch down there. Now you've got a great composition going on from there. You can play around with this as much as you want. The main thing to remember, have a good sense of depth to it. You want to have a foreground, middle ground, and background. You want to have good contrast, so your character shows up, she's really light, so you want the background to be a little bit darker. And you also have good contrast between the each of the elements, not just in lightness and darkness, but also in colors. Let's see, maybe I'll drop the opacity to this one and pull that back in from there. There's a lot you can do with this, but make sure that your eye is drawn to a main focal point as well. So I would definitely add her. You could add a tree if you wanted to. Maybe if you had a picture of someone wandering, you could have that person off in the background doing the same thing back there as well. Hope this helps out. Hope this is what you were looking for as far as a critique or maybe some ideas that you can incorporate in there. If there's anything else that I can show you how to do, please let me know, and best of luck.